Welcome to the final Insider Series from Valenta for 2021. We will be scheduling more in this series in 2022, and you'll be able to see those announcements wherever you get your news feeds. So whether you're watching this live or on a recording, we're happy to have you. We're also making this entire series available as a podcast now. So if you're listening while you're out for a walk or maybe cooking dinner, welcome. It's great to have you here. My name is Richard Nohe. I'm the Managing Director for the U.S. Central Region based in Dallas. And today's topic is challenges faced by financial planners. And I'm really thrilled to be joined by a couple colleagues of mine, Bill Savellis out of Australia, the land down under, and Shyam Ganesh, who is based out of Canada. I'm going to introduce them in a bit more detail and get their backgrounds. But before I do, you'll see a ask questions box somewhere on, which depends on what you're viewing this platform on. But feel free to ask questions in that box. We'll get to them towards the end. We're probably going to spend about 25 or 30 minutes having a conversation, and then we're going to turn to some Q&A. So we look forward to hearing from you in that regard. I'm going to turn it over to Bill to introduce himself, give a bit of background about himself, and then Bill is going to turn it over to Shyam to do the same. So over to you, Bill.
Hi there, my name's Bill Savellis. I'm a managing partner for Valenta here in Sydney, Australia. And I've got I guess my background is that I've been a financial planner for the last 20 years. So I can call myself, I think, a veteran once you hit the 20-year mark. And I've been running my own financial planning practice for the last 12 years. I've got 3 other financial planners that work with me within my business, and I've also got several support staff too. At the moment, we've got 2 offshore support staff that help support the financial planning practice. And what the interesting part of my background is that I was first a client of Valenta before I actually joined Valenta. And about 6 years ago, I made the decision of utilizing virtual staff within my financial planning practice. And I did it because I was getting quite frustrated with the experience that I was having with local staff. So apart from the fact that it was a costly experience, what I found is that they weren't really delivering what my expectations were. And so I kind of thought, you know what, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to trial virtual staff and to see what the outcome is. So at that time, I was obviously introduced to Valenta. I brought on a paraplanner and an admin staff member, and I quickly found that I was quite pleased with the outcomes that I got from that initial experience. So what I found was that the staff were really loyal to my business. We were able to interact on a day-to-day basis. I found that they were they already had a very good understanding of financial planning principles within Australia. And so there wasn't a lot of training that I needed to do in order to bring them up to speed. What I thought was also quite a big advantage was that there was more than just an offshore staff that I could draw on. There was a whole amount of infrastructure behind my support staff member that allowed them to do their job effectively, such as having a supervisor, a manager that I could draw on to help make sure that the staff member was able to do the job quite well. So I was quite happy with the experience that I had. I was actually bragging a lot about Valenta to my colleagues, and what happened was that a lot of my colleagues were approaching Valenta directly and actually signing up and utilizing virtual staff. And it just turned out that I was talking to Valenta, and they just said to me, look, if you're going to refer this much business with us, you might as well join our ranks, which I did. And that's how I really became a managing partner. My specialty is the financial planning space. I focus a great deal of my time within Valenta talking to financial planners and helping them implement virtual staff within their business. And that's really where I spend most of my time. So I hope that's a good enough introduction. I'll bring on Shyam, who can talk about his experience.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks, Richard. Hey, everyone. My name is Shyam Ganesh. I am in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. I just moved here, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. Similar to Bill, I am a financial planner full-time, and I was a client of Valenta's before becoming a managing partner. And I've been in the financial planning space for about 8-9 years. So 2013, I got into the industry. I started completely independent. So, the whole operation has always been, or has started off as just me. And the challenge I faced as I grew was that it was really difficult to find a scalable services. So if I wanted to hire an administrative person, I needed to get someone good, I needed to pay top dollar and get them on full time, but I simply didn't have the budget to be able to do something like that. And if I did get an administrative staff, then they didn't know anything about the technical paraplanning ideas or how to process insurance or investment paperwork. And so over time, I tried and failed along many part-time staffing engagements, knowing that I just simply couldn't keep up with the pace that I was growing at. And I was really thankful. I was at a conference in the US when I met Valenta, and I was really thankful that I did, because they weren't in Canada yet at the time, but I heard stories of what they were doing in Australia and already in the States as they were just expanding there. And I thought, okay, so this is a team of people who are virtual, completely virtual, but they're all speaking the same language, at least the language of financial planning. Although it differs across countries, there are some commonalities. So I thought, okay, I've tried all these things and failed. I don't mind trying another thing, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But when I tried it, I found that the staff were highly qualified. So they all had bachelor's or master's degrees in business, had some paraplanning, financial planning training. And so it took some work, but it didn't take a lot of work for me to train the Canadian lingo, the Canadian paperwork, the Canadian software. And so I started with a part-time technical planning staff member, and that was in 2018, and 3 years later now, I have 3 full-time team members, 2 on the technical side and 1 who does administration only. So I've been able to grow my practice very significantly, and a huge part of that is having had Valenta in my corner. And so about a year, 2 years into being a client of Valenta's, similar to Bill, they approached me and they said, do you want to become, do you want to do some business development for us? You've had so much success. And I was kind of thinking the same thing as I was sharing this story with others, that, as financial planners, we're all in the same boat. And, I can't be the only one who's had this challenge around staffing and compliance. And there's just so much that is thrown at us. To do a good job for one client, we need to do all of this paperwork, we need to do all this compliance, we need to do all this planning work. So yeah, I'm super grateful to have had Valenta, and I'm super grateful to now have the opportunity to share that on a part-time basis with just financial advisors. So I get to talk to 2 to 5 financial planners a week across the country, and it's just beautiful to be able to share experiences, and hoping that I can share some insights today on our call. So I'll pass it back over to Richard.
Yeah, well, thank you both very much, and I think it sort of speaks to the flexibility of the business model that Valenta has. We offer services across consulting and virtual staffing and even automation. But what are some of the ways that you guys really engage, not only on the virtual staffing, but when you speak to your colleagues and your your clients, your potential clients, what are some of the ways that you just find using the Valenta services to have a positive impact on your business, and what are some of those impacts that you see?
I think, look, I speak to quite a few financial planners on a weekly basis, and they all come to me. When they come to me, they're coming to me looking for virtual staff, but I know that it's not really virtual staff that they're approaching me about. What their real issues, what I find most time, is it comes down to processes. And I think that's where my experience as a financial planner actually comes handy. And when I speak to other financial planners, is that the first step, I think, before you bring virtual staff on is to actually review your processes, your systems. And that, I think, a lot of financial planners haven't done that work. And so, and when I mean they haven't done that work, it's all in their head primarily. They understand what the flow is. They've got it all worked out in their own head, but it's not on paper and it's not written down somewhere, and it's not something that is easily followed by any other staff that come into the business. So I work with them to kind of get an understanding of where they're at in that whole journey. What processes have they got in place, if any, and how do they like to work? What is their strength? Where do they want to see where do they want to see themselves spending most of their time? Is it really in just the client engagement piece, or do they see themselves more as a practice manager overseeing the whole process? Or where is it that they see that their place in the business? So I spend a bit of time working that out. Now, obviously, being a financial planner myself, I've got a lot of processes, and I quite often get people asking me if I could share the processes that I've got in place with them, which I do. I'm always happy to share it because I actually think by sharing it, I actually get better at it myself. So I'm always been open to sharing anything that I do. And so, and only last week, I had another financial planner who just came back with saying, "Oh, look, I hear you've got all this stuff. Can you please give it to me?" And which I was happy to do. And I got an email from this morning just thanking me for it because he had just reviewed it. So the first journey, I think, is to really understand that. What I like about Valenta is that they actually have tools to support those processes too. So when I came on board as a client with Valenta, they certainly introduced me to a few things that has helped me stay on top of all my process. And obviously it's developed over the last 6 years with Valenta as well. So processes is first, and then it's about execution. How do you execute those tasks? And that's where the virtual staff come into play. So, and I'd like to refer back to my business because it's a real live example that I can draw on. So where I use the virtual staff, they focus a lot on the actual tasks that are non-client facing. So, I mean, and I don't know if some of these tasks may not be global because they might be unique to Australia, but things like data entry into the CRM, preparing application forms, letters that the clients have to sign, following up with product providers and getting statements or whatever it might be with product providers. That's where I get my virtual staff to focus their efforts. I've got another virtual staff who focuses her whole time on helping me prepare statements of advice, which in Australia, and some people get shocked when they hear this, is as many as 100 pages because of the compliance requirements that we have to deal with. It's ridiculous. But that then frees up my local staff, which I still have local staff. And when I talked about frustrations in the past, the frustrations that I've dealt in the past was that I was spending all my time dealing with every client inquiry, whether it was advice related or not, because my local staff didn't have time to engage with clients because they were too busy doing the administration side of it. Well, all that now has been offloaded to the offshore staff, to the virtual staff, and my local staff are able to engage with clients to build better relationships, which frees my time up to focus on building new referral networks or bringing new clients on board or focusing on the advice aspect of it rather than dealing with every inquiry that a client may have. I have staff now that can handle that. So sorry.
Yeah, no, I think, to me, a lot of it comes down to people, process, and technology, right? And it may be that in financial planning, you might not have the volume, obviously, of on the technology side for automation, like a bank, right? Because there just aren't that many transactions that flow through. But you still have the people, processes, and technology. You can use technology in different ways, and Shyam, what are some of the ways that you're leveraging the technology, and also how are you approaching the consulting aspects and the whole people, process, and technology aspect for your business?
Yeah, I think those are three aspects for all businesses that are important. So financial planning practice is no different. And on the process side, it's really as Bill said, you can't delegate work if you don't have a process for doing it. And so a lot of the time that I spend with advisors is, sometimes, an advisor doesn't need another staff member. All they need is a better process. And just by having that in place, they're able to do double the volume of business they would normally do without needing help. And so, I spend a lot of time asking questions around what is the current process in an advisor's business, just to really understand, okay, what is the flow, what's already working for them? Because if they're in the business, it's not as bad in Canada, the regulation, as it is in Australia, but it is fairly onerous. And so if they're in the business, then they're likely doing something right. So I want to know, first of all, what's working for this advisor. And every advisor is different. It's amazing to see. There's actually a range, like it's all financial planning, but there are so many ways to go from point A to point B. And for an advisor, so many different ways for an advisor to build their practice. So once I've learned what it is that's really working for them, then we say, okay, what's not working? What are the areas in the process of either marketing, selling, servicing a client, managing the operations of the practice, the back end, the compliance, the finance functions? What are all of those processes actually like? And as we start uncovering those and we say, okay, here are the processes that are working really well, here are the processes that are not working so well, we start getting a better understanding of what it is that can be done. So that's the high level kind of process consulting that we do right off the hop. We don't charge anything for it. We just have those conversations really to understand, share very openly what I'm doing in my own practice, but also what I've seen other advisors who may be more similar to them in their strengths and practices. So I share what, here are things that seem to be working, even if it has nothing to do with Valenta, because it's really, I think I see these conversations as an opportunity for us advisors to help each other. That the better we can do for each of our clients, the better we do for all Canadians, in my case. So once we've identified a challenge, so we say, okay, there's a process here that isn't flowing. We've done engagements where our process consultants will go in and map out that process. So they'll say, here's what the process looks like right now, and we'll work together to come up with some solutions to say, okay, you can maybe do your paperwork process this way, or your onboarding process this way instead. So we work together, collaborate, and map it out. So it's all set up on paper, and essentially it's in that process you create an SOP, or a standard operating procedure. So you have a template for here are the steps to follow. And as you build that template, then it's really easy to say, okay, what are the things, Mr. Advisor, Mrs. Advisor, Miss Advisor, what are the things that you actually want to do? Where do you want to be spending your time? And then the other things are the ones that can either be delegated to a person, or often they can even be taken care of by technology. And so in that technology piece, a CRM comes into play, a customer relationship management tool. A lot of independent advisors have CRMs and a lot don't. And so if there isn't a CRM in place, then that's a you can take their process and you can actually map that into technology, see where all the points are where maybe a client can receive an email automatically that the person is doing manually, because the technology knows what part of the process something is in. When you move an opportunity from one stage in Salesforce or Zoho or whatever other CRM that's implemented, when an opportunity moves, it can automatically trigger certain actions. So either create a task for the assistant, create a task for the advisor, send out an email to the client, create a folder on Google Drive or OneDrive. We set up integrations with all of the other technology tools that they're working with. So if they have a calendar scheduling link, right now it comes in and it sits on their calendar, but is it also able to create an event in their CRM so that they can take notes to be compliant without having to manually create that? If they're making a phone call, can that event be automatically tracked in the CRM? So we're looking for these opportunities where we can become more compliant by having better tracking of what is happening, as well as we're letting the technology guide the steps in the process. So we've helped advisors map that process out, implement it into software like a CRM. And then the benefit of doing that is really an advisor has like a view of their entire business in one place, because now they have a dashboard that says, okay, you have 4 investment applications on the go worth $1 million. So now an advisor can look at it and say, okay, these are going to close this month, the following deals are going to close the next month. And so they can start planning and projecting their revenues, and those forecasts can now be used used for business planning. Like when am I going to have revenue? When do I want to have expenses? What's the expansion that I want to do next? Like what do I want to invest in? So really we're looking at the advisory practice because as most professionals are, we love what we do. We love the financial planning aspect of what we do, but we're not always love the operational side. So that's where Valenta comes in and says, okay, let us help you organize the operational stuff, put it into technology so that you can do what you need to do better.
Yeah, and when we say process is really a series of tasks, right? And once you understand those tasks, you can put the right tool to work. Sometimes that's someone local, sometimes it's someone remote, but more and more often these days it's technology. Remember, if anybody has questions, just put them in online there. I want to shift gears a little bit and switch to talking about some of the concerns that you hear, around things such as cybersecurity. There's a lot of fear when it comes to this area, and how are you dealing with some of those issues, Bill?
Well, it's always an issue that gets raised. It's probably the first question that I have to deal with. And within Australia, most financial planners work within a framework where there is an overarching compliance department, and the issues around security really are driven by that department. So generally what they would do is that they will email us a list of questions so that they can get an understanding of how we address security. And in every situation, the compliance department has walked away quite satisfied with the security what we got in place. On a planner level, generally what I talk to the planners specifically about is around what our online and offline security measures are. And so we've got this, obviously it's an issue that we deal with a lot, so there's already material that I provide each of the advisors on. But there is a list of online and offline security measures. Offline security measures usually are things such as the fact that all the staff work in a secure location, which has 24/7 video surveillance, that the staff work off computers where USBs are disabled, where they work, where they don't have access to printers. So these are measures that are put offline so that staff cannot abuse the system. Online, it's more around things such as restricting access to certain websites, and issues such as that. What's the other online? So what software we can potentially use to help limit access to passwords. So there's a list of things that we work with advisors on to make sure that we strengthen the security side of it. And I have to say that, but generally the questions come from a specific compliance department within Australia, and they usually have a list of questions that can vary. But in every scenario, I've never found I've never had an issue with the compliance department, which is obviously a positive. So we thought, are we still on security? We're moving on to other challenges or other questions that are asked by.
Yeah, well, I think maybe if another one that kind of comes up is quality of service and the consistency of work, and how do you make sure that you maintain, security aside, just on how do you make sure that the work done is in an acceptable level and acceptable quality?
That's where I think Valenta, in my humble opinion, excels in comparison to other virtual staff solutions. So first of all, I'll go back to processes is everything, because the more you map out the process, the more consistency you get, and everything is about consistency. There's a phrase within Australia, I'm sure it's universal, but when it comes to property, they always say location, location, location. Well, I think when it comes to business, we always say process, process, process. So it's all about process. So if you've got the process, you'll get more consistency by virtue of the fact that you've got it mapped out. End of story. But in terms of where Valenta, I think, adds additional value is that when a financial planner comes on board with us and hires a virtual staff, they're not hiring one person. They're actually hiring a whole team of people. They just happen to deal with one person on a day-to-day basis who becomes basically entrenched with their team. But behind that individual, there is a supervisor. There is a team of other people who they all kind of talk to and share experiences and kind of understand, ask their colleagues, what would you do in this scenario? And there's also a manager as well. So there's a whole infrastructure that a financial planner can draw on. And I encourage the financial planners that come on board, don't feel like you only have to deal with your staff member. If you feel that there might be some additional training that's required, or there's a process that you want help on in terms of mapping it out, reach out to the supervisor, reach out to the manager, or reach out to me directly, and we'll get involved in terms of managing that whole process. And I think most people don't see that because they think that because they're paying such a reasonable fee for their virtual staff, and they think that fee limits them to just that one person, and it doesn't. They've got access to this whole team of people that they can help better run their business. So that in itself, again, improves on process and it improves the whole outcomes. Because what you find is that, and especially in Australia, because there's been such a rapid change in the financial services sector over the last 10 years, and it's only picked up pace in the last 3 years. Everything's changing so quickly that processes need to adapt with it. So I would always say to the financial planner, speak to the manager, help them work out a better process so that you can get more consistency out of it. And the longer you work with your staff member, the better it all becomes, because they get so familiar with your business that they just know what's required of them. There's a few standard things that we do, and I take them for granted because it's just something that we do with every client, but it's probably worth noting. So The staff members, the virtual staff that work with every financial planner, they will send an email every morning on what task they're going to do for the day. They'll send an email at the end of the day on what task they've completed for the day. Now, that's important because it helps the financial planner get a much better understanding of how the flow is going, okay, where we're up to with everything. And I think that's an important process that we build into the workflow so that we can improve on consistency. Additionally, I say to every financial planner, meet with your virtual staff member every week. Think of them as if they are part of your existing local team. Don't think of them as a separate person over there that's not really part of your business. Incorporate them into your business. Make them one of your own, and you'll find that with that comes loyalty. They get, and you find, and I've seen this happen so many times. The staff become quite protective of their clients because they feel as if they are one of you. And so I would always say, make sure you treat them like one of your own, because it goes so far in terms of, and they get so committed to you that you'll get a better outcome in that experience as well.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Shyam, sometimes virtual staffing gets a bad rap, that it takes jobs away. I think even in the US, even with the great resignation that we've seen with, pandemic, post-pandemic, even though we're not completely through it, but people are leaving their jobs. But how do you see the impact of virtual staffing on local jobs?
Yeah, that's also definitely a question that comes up often along with security. And I would say between those two, a lot of people who are on the fence, like if they're not convinced that those two things are, not the way, or there's a different perspective, then they're usually not even open to the benefits of virtual staffing and getting the process. So I think those are really important questions. I find that, first of all, in my experience, I could not find a paraplanner, someone who is technically very adept at running financial plans, doing insurance, all of the insurance back office work. So again, everything that does not involve a meeting with the client. So the meetings with the clients are done by myself, or in my business, or and all the advisors we work with, they're done by the advisor because it's a regulated function that requires licensing. But to have the technical proficiency to be able to do everything else, I just don't see, and the same on the investment side, a lot of available labor locally that is able to do that. If someone wants an administrative staff member, no problem. There is a lot of local labor available that is either virtual or can come into the office. But this simply doesn't exist, because if someone does become technically proficient, they're usually moving their way up from being an administrative staff member to being an advisor themselves. So it's just not something I see even in Canada. So it's not a job that exists. Like, there's no paraplanning in Canada. That's not a thing. And if there were that job, for example, if I had the technical proficiency, I have a CFP designation, I would be charging, hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to do this. But you're getting someone who is able to understand that level of technical detail, given the time and training, which we do. We treat our virtual staff like our own in-house employees. So we want to give them continuous training development opportunities, as Valenta does in-house. And we encourage our clients to also add to that and provide feedback and say, these are the courses I want the staff member to take. And then they're able to then share that with each other, because there's a team environment. Then you get this huge quality upgrade. So honestly, it just doesn't exist in in the Canadian context. So, if an advisor wants to do all the technical things, wants to delegate all of the technical work, that's not something that's possible. On the flip side, what I do see happens is when for every virtual staff member that I've seen hired, I've never seen anyone let go, any local staff people let go. They usually get reassigned to more client-facing, more business development, more like, a higher touch experience, right? If you lock away a very highly capable administrative assistant, even that's local, in the back room doing paperwork, well, they're not now interfacing with clients the same way that they could if they were freed up from that responsibility. If that's what they're really good at. If they want to be a technical staff member, that's different, but it's difficult to do both. And especially as a business scales, you just don't get the quality when you try to get the same person to do financial planning, administration, insurance paperwork, and investment paperwork. Those are 4 different jobs. Those are specialties that it's very difficult for one person to do. So I just think a lot of great administrative assistants, we're never going to lose the need for a local staff member to do things. It's really just an expansion and an enhancement. So if a business isn't growing, it's it's dying, as they say, like in the world of business, right? And I don't think an advisor practice is very different. So the virtual staffing is just an avenue to grow. It's not an avenue to replace everybody you have and take away jobs. It's an avenue to grow.
Yeah,
I'd like to
go ahead, Bill.
I was going to add to that because that was well put, but I've not seen any local staff let go either. They get repurposed. That's the term that I use. And I've never come across a financial planner who doesn't appreciate that what we do is relationship based. We are a relationship based business. And when you've got local staff spending all their time on administration, then all the relationship based role falls on the advisor, and it's too much for an advisor to deal with. So when you've got your local staff who can help strengthen and deepen a relationship with the client, that's money well spent. It's not well spent when you're paying local staff to do administration. It's a waste of money. It comes down to pure economics. You use the virtual staff to do the stuff that I think I think is important. You've got to do the administration side of it, but it's a fixed dollar fee. You can quantify what value that is. The relationship stuff is worth so much more. And so I would encourage financial advisors to get their local staff more involved in developing closer relationships with their clients so that they can then focus on bringing on new clients. And that where advisors get that, where advisors understand it and the penny drops, then their businesses explode on the back of it. And that's I think the value of putting in place the process that we've been talking about, and actually some virtual staff to support that whole process.
Very good. Yeah, we only have about 5 minutes or so left. We have a question from online of what changes have you had to make to adapt to the pandemic environment?
From my perspective, I have to say I made no changes. I was already virtual, so my business, whilst I have an office in the city, all my staff work in a different location, and not obviously my virtual staff are working from location, but so were my local staff. I had already made that transition. I could see that we're gonna get to a world where everything became more virtual. I didn't predict the pandemic, of course, otherwise I would have been a genius, but I didn't predict it. I didn't think it was going to happen as rapidly as it did, but I could see that it was going that way. And so for me, I had to make no changes because everything was already online. So I was quite lucky in that I've actually found that my business improved during the pandemic period, not went backwards. So I was lucky in that regard. But what do people need, what would advisors need to do? Well, they would need to bring those processes online. You can't have, we talked about processes, and I do see advisors who've got processes, but it's still in paper form. They'll have checklists sitting on top of a paper file, which they hand around the office. That's a process, but it's an offline process. And that doesn't work when you're virtual, because you don't want to scan documents and then start emailing them around. So those processes we talked about would need to be online. And there needs to be a mechanism for people to communicate with each other. And Microsoft Teams, for example, is a good tool for that. There's a way for people to interact. There's a way for people to have meetings like this. We're on Zoom today. So you need to be comfortable having these kind of meetings. So that's obviously an important part. And so we also use within Valenta a tool called Smartsheet, which is like a Microsoft Excel but online. And I find that to be a very useful tool as well, in terms of helping map out some of those processes where advisors probably don't have a great CRM, or have a great CRM but never really quite understood how to maximize its use, because they've just never taken the time to really understand its power, which is quite often the case. So we'll use something like a Smartsheet as a way of helping develop some of those processes. So that would be my response to that question.
Shyam, what about you?
Similar to Bill, I was already all online, so it really didn't, I didn't even skip a beat as everything was going down. I was already on Zoom running meetings, and my clients were already on Zoom running meetings. What I hear from a lot of advisors that I spoke to before the pandemic and then during the pandemic, early on, was that the fear was around, will clients be comfortable doing meetings online? Because a lot of business was being done at an office face to face. And I would always share my experience. I would say, hey, look, I've been doing this since 2013, 100% online from day one. And I've never had a client complain, or I've had a handful that have wanted to meet in person. But then we go for beers because we're already done. The business, the work is already done. So we're just, when we meet, we're having fun. So I think that's a major doubt and fear that was in the heads of a lot of advisors. But as the pandemic dragged on, initially, advisors said, okay, we'll just, maybe it's a 2 months off and we're going to be back in the office in 2 months. And then it became 3 months, and then it became 6 months, and then it became a year. And a lot of advisors did say, okay, now we have to do something. So we're going to start doing those online meetings. And people started to realize that it works. It does work. Clients are not against it. Clients are very happy to stay in their pajamas and do a 15-minute meeting rather than get in the car or drive downtown. We have snow. Like, I was in Edmonton at the time. We have so much snow there. Nobody wants to drive out in icy road conditions to come downtown, pay for parking downtown, to go to a fancy office to do something that could have been done in 15 minutes on a Zoom call. And so I think those changes that have already happened. I think they've already happened. Maybe I'm overstepping, or but as far, like, a lot of advisors I've spoken to more recently have transitioned and are comfortable online. And so if the meetings can happen online, and as Bill said, the processes, the technology is there, there's not, the checklists are not in the office, they're in a CRM, in a Smartsheet, in a Google Drive, OneDrive, a project management tool has been implemented, like a Smartsheet, a Trello, a Asana, then you've got everything you need in order to run a completely virtual practice, not only to have a successful virtual staff relationship, whether that's wherever that staff member is located, but also then to meet clients and run everything very flexibly.
I don't meet clients face to face anymore, unless it's in a more social setting. All business is done via Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and and I'm an example of where I've taken my business completely online, and it hasn't hurt my business. In fact, if anything, it's grown my business because I can actually do a lot more.
Yeah, and I think more broadly, businesses like Valenta, and really the world, the pandemic has been incredible. The impact that it has had on technology adoption, and people are just more comfortable with meetings like this, and it's not going to go back to the way it was. It'll be a different type of interaction. So it's here to stay. We've run out of time. I want to thank both of you for your participation. It's been an excellent conversation. I would say to any of the financial planners listening in, please get in touch. Any way that we can help you grow your business, we'd be more than happy to speak with you. Also think about the businesses that some of your clients have. A lot of them, I'm sure, are professionals, whether lawyers, doctors, dentists, engineers, and a lot of them probably are medium-sized business owners. And that's really our core focus as well, on those medium enterprises, to provide them with virtual staffing, with process consulting, and even automation. So please get in touch. This is the last Insider series for Valenta for 2021, but we're looking forward to a fantastic 2022. It's hard to believe we're already almost there, but thank you very much for joining us, and wish you the best. Happy holidays, and have a wonderful new year. And I'll sign off with that. Thank you. Bye-bye.